I didn't raise my voice that night. I didn't slam the table. I didn't even stop smiling. But by the time dinner was over, my son's life had quietly changed, and he didn't even know it yet. It only took one word. One careless, laughing, harmless little word. Nobody. He said it in front of his wife. In my house. At my table. And while they were still finishing their wine, I had already decided something they would feel for the next 30 days and remember for the rest of their lives. Because sometimes the calmest reaction carries the loudest consequence. And sometimes a father's silence is not weakness. It's a warning. Then your story continues. My name is Peter Lawson. I am 60 years old. This hook builds tension, promises consequences, and makes the audience wonder. What did he decide? What happened after? How did it change their lives? If you'd like, I can also create a darker, more emotional, or more dramatic hook version. Welcome to my YouTube channel Moral Ecos, where silence speaks. My name is Peter Lawson. I am 60 years old, and I have lived long enough to know that disrespect rarely arrives wearing a warning sign. It comes wrapped in laughter. It hides inside jokes. It sits across from you at your own dinner table and calls you a nobody while sipping wine you paid for. The night my son said it, he didn't mean to wound me. That was the worst part. He didn't even realize he had. And I smiled. I smiled the way fathers do when their hearts crack quietly, so no one else has to hear the sound. Then I reached into my pocket, felt the weight of the house keys in my hand, and made a decision that would change both our lives. The man I became. My name is Peter Lawson. I am 60 years old. I have buried a wife. I have raised a son. I have worked 35 years with my hands, bending metal, tightening bolts, fixing engines that other men had given up on. I understand machines. They are honest. When something breaks, they show you exactly where the crack is. People are different. When my wife, Margaret, passed away from cancer, Daniel was 9. He stood beside me at the funeral wearing a suit that was slightly too big, gripping my fingers like I might disappear too. I promised him that day I would never let him feel alone. And I kept that promise. I learned how to braid hair for school picture day before he insisted he was too old for that kind of help. I burned more pancakes than I can count trying to recreate his mother's Sunday breakfasts. I attended every parent-teacher meeting, every soccer game, every science fair. I was mother and father, provider and comforter, protector and encourager. When Daniel cried at night, I sat on the edge of his bed and told him that strong men cry too, but they stand back up afterward. I never imagined one day I would be the one needing to stand back up. The house that held us. The house on Willow Creek Road isn't grand. White siding. 2 bedrooms. A narrow staircase that creaks at the 3rd step. But inside those walls live 30 years of memories. There's still a faint scratch on the hallway paint from when Daniel rode his bicycle indoors after I told him not to. The kitchen cabinets have dents from when he practiced baseball swings inside the house. Margaret's photograph hangs above the fireplace, her smile frozen in time, watching over everything. When Daniel married Emily 3 years ago, I invited them to move in. You don't have to, he had said. I want to, I replied. Truthfully, I didn't want to sit alone in that house with only memories for company. I thought having them there would keep the rooms alive. At first it did. Emily was polite, kind in a careful way. But slowly I noticed changes. The curtains Margaret chose were replaced. The old wooden coffee table was called dated. The oak floors I had installed with my own hands were described as too dark. I let it slide. Young people like things bright and new. I told myself I was being supportive. But support, I would later realize, should not mean disappearing. The dinner that broke something. It was a Thursday night. Pasta on the stove, garlic in the air, a bottle of red wine breathing on the table. Daniel was talking about a promotion he hoped to get. Emily was scrolling through renovation ideas on her phone. "We should really modernize this place," she said. "Open concept, new floors, lighter colors." Daniel nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, Dad, we could make it look amazing." I chuckled softly. "Amazing? What's wrong with it now?" Emily hesitated. "It just feels old." "Old? I am 60 years old. I know what that word sounds like when it isn't about furniture." Daniel laughed lightly. "Dad's just old school. He doesn't get trends." I smiled faintly. Then he leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine. "He's basically a nobody in the modern world." Emily laughed, and something inside me went very still. Nobody. The man who stayed up nights, sewing patches onto his jeans to afford Daniel's textbooks. The man who sold his motorcycle to cover tuition. The man who worked double shifts so his son could attend college without drowning in debt. Nobody. I felt Margaret's photograph on the wall behind me, as if her eyes were watching. I smiled. I folded my napkin neatly, and I reached into my pocket. The smile before the storm. At 60, you don't react the way you did at 30. You don't shout. You don't slam doors. You measure your response. "Daniel," I said calmly, "come talk to me for a minute." He followed me into the living room. The house felt different now. Smaller. Quieter. "What's wrong?" he asked. I looked at him carefully. Not as the little boy with scraped knees, but as the man standing in my house, calling me a nobody. "Do you believe that?" I asked softly. "Believe what?" "That I'm a nobody." He rolled his eyes. "Dad, it was a joke." "No," I said gently, "it was." Silence stretched. "You've been embarrassed by me," I continued. "By the house, by how I live, by how I talk." "That's not true." "It is." His jaw tightened. "You're building your future," I said, "and I'm proud of you, but you're building it by pretending I was never part of the foundation." Then I took the house keys from my pocket. The metal glinted under the light. I placed them in his palm. "You have 30 days," I said. "For what?" "To find your own place." His face drained of color. "Dad, you can't be serious." "I am." "You're kicking us out over a joke." "I'm not kicking you out," I replied. "I'm reminding you that respect lives here, and if I'm a nobody in this house, then I have no business owning it." The aftermath. Emily was furious. She called me dramatic. Said I was manipulating Daniel. Daniel tried to argue, but I stood firm. For years, I had bent to keep peace. That night, I stood straight. The next 30 days were tense. Boxes appeared. Conversations became short and clipped. But something unexpected happened inside me. I began to feel solid again. I repainted the spare room. I polished the oak floors. I joined a woodworking group downtown. I laughed more. Sometimes, reclaiming your dignity feels like breathing fresh air after years in a crowded room. The goodbye. When moving day arrived, Daniel carried boxes to the truck without speaking much. Emily avoided my gaze. At the door, Daniel paused. He looked around. At the pencil marks on the hallway wall. At his mother's photo. At the table where he'd done homework. "Dad," he whispered. "Yes." "I didn't mean it." "I know." I was just trying to sound successful. I nodded slowly. "Success that requires shrinking someone else isn't success, son." His eyes watered. For a moment, he looked 9 years old again. He hugged me tightly. "I'm sorry." I held him, and for the first time in years, he felt like my son, not a man trying to outrun his past. The silence and the return. The house was quiet again. Lonely at times, but peaceful. 3 months later, my phone rang. "Dad," Daniel said softly, "can we come over for dinner?" When they arrived, Emily carried a homemade pie. She looked humbled. Dinner was different. More gratitude. More listening. Less performing. At one point, Daniel ran his hand over the oak floor. "You and Mom put these in yourselves." "We did. They're beautiful." I saw something shift in him then. Understanding. Recognition. Respect. What I learned at 60. My name is Peter Lawson. I am 60 years old. And I learned that love without boundaries becomes self-erasure. We think being a good parent means endless forgiveness, endless patience, endless sacrifice. But children grow into adults who must learn consequences. Not cruel ones, necessary ones. Daniel calls me Dad, now with a different tone. A heavier one. A respectful one. He visits every Sunday. Not because he has to, but because he wants to. Sometimes we sit on the porch in silence. And silence, when it carries respect, is a beautiful thing. The moral: never allow anyone, even your own child, to reduce your worth for the sake of their comfort. Sacrifice does not make you small. Age does not make you irrelevant. And love does not require you to accept humiliation. Stand up calmly. Speak softly. Set your boundaries firmly. Because the moment you accept being a nobody, you teach the world how to treat you. I am Peter Lawson. I am 60 years old. I am a father. And I am somebody.